Here's an example of how you can take a set of documentation and then publish it two different ways. In this case, what I'm doing is I have a set of documentation and I'm publishing it using a static site generator and some GitHub actions and a continuous integration server out to our public website. And so this is under the Docs tab, and you can go and then you see the table of contents and you read it. Okay, so that's one destination. You write the documentation and you run it through that processing pipeline, and it winds up on the website. But I also want to view the same documentation inside of OpenSquiggly, right? So that way, if I'm a developer and I've got all my source code and everything like that, well, I want to read the user documentation too. So what I want to be able to do is bring this into my account, and we can do that here. And so we see that I've got the way I've set my table of contents up. I've got an OpenSquiggly folder. Underneath OpenSquiggly, I've got user docs, and underneath user docs, I see that I've got the exact same documentation here in OpenSquiggly that I have on my website. So that shows the dual publishing of a single set of documentation out to two different destinations. So let's see how we did that. If we look at the source code for our website, which is doing all that static site generation business, I can go into where the source code for the documentation is, and that's under source opensquiggly.com, input, docs, user docs. And so if I look at these folders here, I can see this is where, like the forward, that's the documentation for the forward. This is the documentation for the use cases here, etc. And then there's these .opensquiggly files that control the table of contents when you publish it into OpenSquiggly. All right. And so the trick now to bringing this into OpenSquiggly is that I want to, so first I mount the opensquiggly.com full source code, all right? This is typically how I like to do it. That way I can see the full source code. So I've got a mount point here called opensquiggly.com to, and that is cloning the opensquiggly.com website from GitHub. All right, so that brings in the raw files and folders. Then I create a second mount point, which is going to reuse that existing repository. And this time I'm going to set the tree format type to OpenSquiggly simplified document tree formatter, which is going to use those .opensquiggly files. And notice the path here, the start path. I don't want to get the whole entire repository. I want to start at source opensquiggly.com, input user docs, or docs user docs, which is what I was just pointing out here, where the documentation comes from. It all starts here at this user docs level and goes down from there. So by creating a second mount point that maps to that starting location, all right, and then setting the formatting, instead of saying raw, I set it to OpenSquiggly simplified document tree formatter, all right, then OpenSquiggly is going to dynamically process all of the files and dynamically format them. And then when I map that into my user page, then I get the formatted documentation I was seeing. So this really is a much easier way to get formatted documentation versus using a static site generator. I mean, we had our reasons for using a static site generator here because we were building our public website and we wanted to have the documentation included as part of that. So we had our reasons for doing it, but that was a lot of work, setting up that source directory, setting up the templates, setting up, the table of contents management, all that was a lot of work. So it's a lot easier if all you're trying to do is write documentation and then have it get formatted into a site. It's a lot easier to use OpenSquiggly. You don't have to bother with your static site generator and setting up all the code and all the templates and everything that drives the static site generator. All you need to do is just write those .open squiggly files, specify your table of contents, write your markdown files, and specify your table of contents in the .open squiggly files. Come into Open Squiggly, attach it, and boom, you've got your documentation. No static site generator to mess with. And so it's just a much easier pathway for getting something up and running. And then also, as in this case, you can dual process, right? So this is another advantage to keeping your documentation outside of a wiki and storing it inside of a Git repository, is you can do more than one thing with it. And that's what I've demonstrated here with the website and then dual purposing it inside of Open Squiggly. Thanks for watching.